It's Christmas time. The perfect time to send holiday greetings to the people who matter in your life.
Now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho.
Spend time with the people that you love.
Just the pussy I've been looking for.
Invest maximum effort in decorating. And engage in the most Christmas tradition of them all, rampant consumerism. The day after Christmas, Netflix is releasing the second season of Squid Game, perhaps the perfect chaser to the materialism and goodwill of the season. The show's first season, released in September 2021, was a genuine cultural phenomenon. It reportedly pulled in 1.65 billion hours of viewing in the first 4 weeks of its release, quickly surpassing Bridgerton as the company's most watched original to that point. By the start of December 2024, the first season had been viewed by 330 million viewers worldwide, who have streamed a total of 2.8 billion hours of it. For those few people who have yet to watch the show, Squid Game follows a down-on-his-luck gambler who's invited to participate in a tournament with 455 other players, competing for a prize fund of 45.6 billion won, which was worth about $38 million in September 2021 when the show premiered. Desperate contestants are invited to compete in a series of children's games over the course of 6 days for the amusement of an extremely wealthy audience. Squid Game is very firmly rooted in South Korean culture. The eponymous tournament is built around children's games, many of which are specific to South Korea. For example, the players are recruited to the tournament following a game of dakchi with a recruitment agent. One of the show's most iconic challenges finds contestants trying to trace the outline of a shape from a piece of dalgona candy, a traditional Korean snack. In Korean culture, if a customer can retrieve the shape without breaking it, it's customary to give them a second treat for free. The show opens with the protagonist explaining the rules of the eponymous Korean game to the audience. This level of cultural specificity in a breakout hit like this is interesting, given that most of Netflix's other big breakout hits have tended to be in English. However, Squid Game taps into something much more universal. It resonated with a growing frustration about income inequality and class anxiety in the larger world. While this is a particularly prominent issue in South Korea, where it's estimated that in 2015, the top 10% of South Koreans held 2/3 of the nation's wealth, the sentiment is increasingly universal. Inequality increased by around 20% in the United States between 1980 and 2016, as the average compensation for a CEO at one of the top 350 companies in America rose by 1,460% between 1978 and 2021, while the average worker's compensation grew by a mere 18.1% in the same period. And you can see this class anxiety rippling through broader pop culture, not just in popular South Korean films that have managed to break out internationally, such as Snowpiercer or Burning, but even in American films and television. Pretty much every major Batman adaptation since 2012 has had some element of class anxiety underpinning it.
You think all this can last? There's a storm coming, Mr. Wayne. You and your friends better batten down the hatches, because when it hits, you're all gonna wonder how you ever thought you could let us so large and leave so little for the rest of us.
Even the Willy Wonka prequel musical hit this theme pretty hard.
The greedy beat the needy, Willy. It's just the way of the world.
And look, when your biopic of Chocolate Howard Hughes is demonstrating class consciousness, it's maybe a sign that there is something in the air. And of course, the international success of Squid Game came just 2 years after Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, a South Korean film, became the first non-English language movie to win the Best Picture Oscar, tapping into some of the very same anxieties, and perhaps serving as a key text for the internet's favorite thesis. I mean literal thesis, not like a metaphorical one. Ironically, Squid Game itself has become self-demonstrating, in a twist that makes Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop look like a work of subtlety and nuance, and almost makes me question the point of cultural criticism at all. The competition has been defictionalized at least twice, once by YouTuber Mr. Beast and then by Netflix itself as the challenge, in which viewers are invited to watch desperate individuals down on their luck compete in a facsimile of the brutal games for life-changing amounts of cash. You do have to provide your own human furniture, though. Who said irony was dead? So with the second season just around the corner, we thought we'd take a look at how Squid Game expresses these ideas. The way that it uses its storytelling, its thematic preoccupations, and its visual language to tell a universal story about the horrors of late capitalism. particularly through the lens of the human body. Keep in mind that there will be spoilers for the first season here, although we will avoid the ending. We'll be talking about a lot of stuff in the middle of the season. By the time I'd written this, I'd yet to actually see the second season, so don't worry too much about spoilers around that. There will also be candid, graphic depictions and discussion of violence. So with all of that in mind, let's get right into the main body of the video. At its core, Squid Game is a dystopian horror story about the nightmare of late capitalism, of characters forced to subject themselves to inhuman suffering and torture for a shot at economic independence. Player 456 is a failed entrepreneur and gambler in debt to loan sharks. Player 67 is a North Korean defector looking to buy her family passage to the south. Player 101 is a gangster fleeing his creditors. Although the anonymous and masked officials operating the contest insist that all competitors are participating voluntarily,
you called and volunteered to participate in this game of your own free will.
Squid Game makes it clear that very few of the contestants have a meaningful choice. Those taking part have no practical alternative. If they do not play, many players face death, imprisonment, or ruin. While the players consent to the dystopian rules of the game, that consent is at best manufactured and leveraged. Indeed, one of the smarter structural conceits of the original 9-episode season is the decision to have the players vote to end their involvement after the first round, a variation on red light, green light. Realizing that the stakes of this competition are quite literally life and death, with elimination being fatal, the players panic and vote by a majority to suspend the games in accordance with Clause 3 of the, quote, consent form. Early in the show's second episode, all the players effectively opt out of playing. They take their balls and go home. However, over the course of that second episode, the overwhelming majority of the 201 surviving players opt to return to continue the games.
Out of 201, 187 returned. The re-entrance rate is 93%.
There's no real choice for these characters, only the illusion of choice. These characters are manipulated into corners, placed in impossible situations with no tangible or reasonable means of escape, then presented with a path to freedom that inevitably profits the person making the offer more than the individual paying the price. Writer and director Wang Dong-yeok understands this reality. During the decade that he spent trying to develop Squid Game as a film, he, his mother, and his grandmother each took out loans to keep their family solvent. One of the very real barriers to completion of the script was that Yong was forced to sell the laptop on which he was writing Squid Game for $675 in cash. The terms of the deal that he eventually brokered with Netflix meant that he earned no residuals based on the show's success and retained no ownership of the intellectual property, meaning that he hasn't seen a share of the reported $900 million that the show is worth to Netflix according to leaked internal documents. Despite its bleak science fiction trappings, Squid Game is anchored in first-hand experience. One of the most interesting motifs in Squid Game is the emphasis on body horror as a metaphor for the more abstract nightmare of contemporary capitalism. This is baked into the premise. As mentioned earlier, the game begins with 456 players, each competing for a prize fund of 45.6 billion won. With the death of each player, 100 million won is dropped into a transparent ball at the center of the dormitory, demonstrating precisely how much each individual human life is worth. When recruiting potential candidates, the salesman gambles with money that he knows his competitors do not have. When they lose, he asks them to agree to accept a slap in place of payment, leveraging their bodies to write off their debt. When he wins, he slaps 456 repeatedly. However, when 456 wins and moves to return the favor, the salesman catches his hand mid-air and pays 456 the money that they bet. This is the privilege of wealth. The salesman has the luxury of not having to offer his bodily autonomy as a prize to pay off his debts. I guess in the parlance of the kids, you could say that wealth really slaps. Ow! What was that for? Throughout Squid Game, there's a tendency to think of human beings as nothing but raw material, from which economic value might be extracted. When a loan shark finally tracks down 456, he makes it clear that he will recover his money from the gambler one way or another. He talks explicitly about harvesting value from the protagonist's organs.
If you don't pay it off by next month, I'll take one of your kidneys. And then, after that, I'll take one of your eyes, okay?
456 literally signs the terms of his loan extension in his own blood. It's telling by the way that the loan shark pauses to savor the taste of that blood.
Got a sweet taste to it. I think my boys and I should make a nice, delicious soup with it.
Vampirism has long served as a metaphor for capitalism, dating back to the pages of Das Kapital.
Capital is dead labor that, vampire-like, only lives by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks.
And look, our research department really deserved top marks for pulling that one back.
Did somebody say Khrushchev?
The show's title also recalls Matt Taibbi's famous description of Goldman Sachs as, quote, a great vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. The vampire squid is a manifestation of capitalism as a parasitic entity, eager to feed on human flesh and blood. Although, fun fact, the actual vampire squid isn't actually a bloodsucker, it just got that name because the people who discovered it thought that it looked pretty darn goth. Look at you go. Harvesting body parts as collateral is seemingly standard operating procedure in the world of Squid Game. When Player 101, the gangster, meets with an associate during the suspension of the games, he's shocked to discover that his old friend sold him out to his Filipino creditors.
They'll take your liver, your kidneys, and your eyes for the money you owe.
Once again, the player's body becomes forfeit, a means of generating return on lost investment. Even within the games themselves, the bodies of dead contestants are just another potential revenue stream for any individual enterprising enough to seize an opportunity. Contestant 111, for example, is able to leverage his outside experience as a doctor to assist several of the guards in a black market organ harvesting ring, trading his skills for foreknowledge of the upcoming games. The logic is cold and bleak. These dead bodies would otherwise just be going to waste, burnt in the incinerator. Tellingly, when the frontman, the master of ceremonies overseeing the games, discovers this side hustle, he isn't outraged by the desecration of the dead bodies.
Whether you sell the dead bodies' organs, or eat them, or whatever, I don't give a damn.
Instead, he's angered by the betrayal of the most important aspect of this place, the illusion of a fair game through the trading of information. This recurring preoccupation with organ harvesting is just the most literal manifestation of this commodification of the human body. It plays out in other ways throughout the season, some heightened and some much more grounded. When a group of wealthy spectators, for example, arrive to watch the final rounds, beautiful naked servants covered in body paint serve as literal human furniture, particularly cushions and footstools. When contestants don't have any other way to leverage a situation, their body becomes currency. During one round, for example, contestants' bodies are literally used to test which of the two plates of glass are safe to use. More abstractly, desperate to survive but without any inherent skills or advantages, player 212 trades her body, exchanging sexual favors with 101 in return for protection. This is not a unique idea. The guards clearly have similar conceptions of players' ownership over their own bodies. One guard, for example, admits to raping one contestant who survived her elimination before harvesting her organs.
Before we operated on her, we took turns having sex with the girl, okay?
Ultimately, the economics within the reality of the game are really just a heightened expression of the unarticulated logic of capitalism in the outside world. Contestant 199, for example, is missing 2 fingers on his left hand as a result of a workplace accident. During an argument with his employer over unpaid wages, that boss's hand gets caught in a rolling machine, a very literal manifestation of the show's preoccupation with the horror of human beings caught in capitalist machinery. When Squid Game was released and became a global sensation, there was some hand-wringing about the show's graphic and gory depiction of human suffering. Certainly there's no shortage of blood and violence on display, which has led to some criticism that the show's, quote, violent and deranged brutality towards the human form was, quote, unnecessary, serving as little more than a provocative contrast with the ostensibly childish games the cast were being forced to play. However, the show's consistent focus on the human form, on the limits and the tactile reality of the human body, is central to its core themes and ideas. Capitalism is a philosophy built around materialism, the idea that objects have intrinsic value that can be commodified and traded. The human body is the most basic resource that a person has, something that they can retain even after losing everything else. In a materialist world, it is the last object that a person can trade, sell, or leverage. Incidentally, this is an increasingly common and mainstream theme in popular art. Just look at this year's award contenders, for example. The current Best Picture frontrunner Anora is about the eponymous sex worker, perhaps the most literal manifestation of the idea of a person forced by economic necessity to leverage their body as an economic commodity. In The Substance, Demi Moore plays Elizabeth Sparkle, a celebrity whose entire lifestyle depends on leveraging her own body and image. When she turns 50, she discovers that her body no longer has the value that it once had in the marketplace.
At 50, it stops.
What stops?
And therefore turns to the eponymous substance. The idea of the human body as raw material that has some intrinsic value that can be extracted from it materially is a major recurring motif in both of George Miller's recent Mad Max movies. Hell, even in something as abstract as Conclave, a movie about the difference between the material and the spiritual, the physical and the metaphysical. There is a recurring tension between the idea of faith and the body of the church. In fact, there's a central plot line about corruption within the body, in which a major candidate for the papacy may have been involved in simony, which is the trading of church positions for influence and or wealth.
I'm aware of what simony is, thank you.
Okay, no need to be so touchy about it. All of which is to say, these themes are not unique to Squid Game. They speak to a broader anxiety rippling its way through the culture. Squid Game is just a little bit more direct about them. There is an irony here. The wealthy operators and spectators of the tournament can gamble on the lives of players, but their own bodies are still subject to the laws of nature. Elderly contestant 001 is eventually revealed to be the original designer of the games, even modeling one of the rooms on his own childhood. His immense wealth and power means nothing when he's diagnosed with a fatal brain tumor. Ultimately, the human body is a commodity, not an equitable investment. It has no long-term value when measured in these terms. Squid Game creator Wang Dong-hyuk understands this as well. The stress of producing the show was so great that he lost 8 or 9 teeth in the process. This was the cost that Squid Game exacted from him. With all that in mind, one might rightfully ask why he would return to make a second season of a show that he retained no ownership stake in. His answer was the same given by any of the players who returned to that game after the original hiatus. Money. It turns out that everything has a price, even the human body. I've been Darren Mooney, and this was The Backdrop.